This is freaking dumb, to put it mildly. Sales struggled because it wasn't live service. That is the essential takeaway from EA on Dragon Age the Veilguard missing their internal sales metrics. And my god, they are learning the wrong damn lessons again. And just a quick disclaimer before we get into the video, if you're here because you want to rage against Dragon Age being woke, Dragon Age has always been woke. And if that's what you're looking for, I've got great news for you because there are a ton of rage bait videos out there to go and watch. This isn't one of them. This is about corporate greed and totally misunderstanding the assignment and missing the actual, critiques and criticisms that are valid that could have made a better Dragon Age 5. Thank you so much. There are a lot of lessons to be learned from Dragon Age the Veilguard, like the need for a cohesive development team and a unified vision that doesn't get consistently reworked and rebooted over a 10-year period of trying to chase trends. Or perhaps that they could learn when they're making changes, when they want to do something like a change in combat in a long-running franchise. Doing things incrementally is better than doing everything wholesale. And perhaps most importantly, more important than any of that even, is that storytelling is incredibly important to a franchise that relies on storytelling. That and, well, choices, which we'll get into that a little bit more. But this is mostly just about EA. Because you see, in the past, things have happened with Dragon Age, with titles where they went into open world trend chasing, trying to make an MMORPG-esque like game, and that game sold 12 million copies. They've done things like trying to change up their entire combat system from game 1 in Dragon Age Origin, or real-time with pause combat, to game 2, where they tried to make it much more action-oriented and ship that game like a year after doing the first one. They've stumbled and struggled and made massive changes before, and I don't necessarily know that they've learned in those instances, but they're certainly not learning here. And part of the thing that was always consistent was the storytelling and the choices. But instead of looking holistically at what they could have done better and what they did well in this game, it sounds like EA isn't listening at all. Instead, they think that the reason why Dragon Age the Veilguard wasn't received as well as they had hoped is because it didn't have a fucking battle pass. After leaning into live serves for years and consistently fumbling it, EA pivoted away from it and actually released a banger of a single-player game with Jedi Fallen Order. This marked a change in strategy that over the next few years also saw the release of a single-player sequel of that game. And then when rumors that Dragon Age 4's lengthy and tormented dev cycle had been rebooted and changed from a live service game to a single-player RPG, we actually rejoiced around that. Because live service in this game was not something we wanted. It was a mistake from the beginning to try to shoehorn that into the game, not that you didn't stick with that plan. And by and large, it's not just because of live service, it's because of EA's version of live service. There is a history with EA of a ton of overly monetized drivel that comes with it. Overly monetized drivel that EA is very, very well known for. Stuff like being so bad with it that you actually create a place where legislation can be pushed against the gaming industry because you were so freaking greedy with your monetization and loot boxes. Since the little nugget of information has come to light, fans of Dragon Age and even former creators of Dragon Age have categorized EA's take on this as being at best out of touch, or at worst, and most likely, selfish, greedy, and overall harmful to gaming. One such critic is David Gaider, who among several other credits at BioWare was the lead writer of Dragon Age Origins. And in a multi-paragraph post over on Blue Sky, they had some important things to say that I want to highlight. Now, I've linked the post in the description, or you can pause it here if you want to read every single line, but I'm going to kind of paraphrase this. Out of touch CEOs see sales numbers on trendy action and live service games and thinks, I want that. They don't take into consideration that Fortnite, FIFA, which is now FC, and Baldur's Gate 3 have different audiences. Or as he put it, quote, "Some uppity dev spoils your buzz by saying that doesn't apply equally to all games. How dare that dev understand games better than the CEO?" Crazy. Essentially, that there are both genre and IP expectations. Expectations for Dragon Age specifically, like player choice, player agency. The game doesn't do as well as the CEO wanted. It doesn't reinvigorate the IP, so they lay off all of the devs, many of whom would have previously worked on other fantastic RPGs that did very well for them. Some of them were laid off even before the game launched after putting in work on the game for years. And they're looking around like a fucking shocked Pikachu, like, what just happened? You just happened. Your decision making just happened. Your out of touch distance decision making that was so set on trying to make massive profit, but not actually understanding the product that you were trying to put out. Because the answer that you arrived to is that it wasn't live service enough. And you arrive at that answer while also at the same time telling everybody that your other live service game, which makes over $2 billion per year, also struggled. FC 2025, that part gets a little buried in all this. That the two main reasons why they said they missed expectations were their gigantic, huge live service game and their much smaller by comparison RPG. The football game that gets remade every single year and exists like other sports games to use live service updates and microtransactions to extend profits also underperformed. EA's FC makes about $2 billion a year per Reuters, with 800 million of that coming from Ultimate Team, their main microtransactions, their main live service. Maybe, just maybe, the mistakes coming from the top mean the top should be the first to go, not the devs that put in so much effort to make the game work. This is just so frustrating. Dragon Age the Veilguard isn't a bad game. It does a lot of things really well and it has some insanely high production value, but it unmistakably fumbles in things that are so key to Dragon Age, like player agency with choices both big and small, and dialogue that isn't so heavily covered in the veneer of civility. Marvel-esque dialogue. It was a Dragon Age lacking in trademark snark, utterly too soft and gentle and stripped down. And they did that while also making wholesale changes. It's basically a two-front thing where you're asking players to try these new things, but also not giving them the old things. And I think some of the new things were good. I actually enjoyed the combat in Dragon Age the Veilguard, for example. I didn't enjoy not having the same kind of level of choice and decision making that I had in older games in that series. They were, in a sense, still trend chasing. Dragon Age has historically been messy. It's not grimdark, but it comes with deep moral questions. There's quite literally a Sophie's Choice situation in Dragon Age Origins between a mother sacrificing herself or killing a kid. Yes, there's a third option that I didn't know about, and I still get teased about the fact that I didn't know there was a third option, so I had to murder the mother. But I had to make a choice anyway. Like, I had to make a difficult choice. And Dragon Age the Veilguard does have difficult choices, but not with the same frequency that other games have had. It's like a zero sugar version of your very favorite soft drink, which probably isn't surprising given that it got rebooted so many times during development, that they had so many layoffs during development, and that it started out as a trend-chasing live service game, and now their thought process is the problem is that we didn't chase that trend hard enough. A trend that you were chasing for 10 freaking years. The trend is gone. That's not how trends work. Just think about how many live service games got canceled in production this year. Instead of having a conversation, a good conversation about what was good about Dragon Age the Veilguard, what was not good about Dragon Age the Veilguard, we're having a conversation about something that shouldn't be in the conversation at all. Live service is not the thing we need to be talking about. Let's talk about the good things, like the freaking hair physics, which were incredible. Let's talk about the really incredible production value. Or let's talk about how the combat was fun, although it could have been improved. Why don't we have the ability to have full control of companions with that same combat system? Because it was a marked improvement, at least to me, over Inquisitions. Why are we saying, well, we don't have a Game Pass, so that's why it failed? Why aren't we talking about what Dragon Age is? Something that was also mentioned in this thread from David Gaider, from this comment, this user who I think really encapsulates what Dragon Age is at its core. Quote, BioWare games of 15 years ago were great because of strong writing, rich lore, and world-building nuanced characters, and giving players weighty choices. All of that has sadly been missing since Mass Effect 3. Strong writing, rich lore, and nuanced characters. That's what we all wanted. That's what we needed. You can convince people to try a different combat system if you have that core. Baldur's Gate 3 is a pretty good example of that, of moving from real-time with pause to straight up turn-based combat, which also caused a lot of controversy. But once you start chipping away at the core, then the other issues start to be more felt, like being told every puzzle. Well, I personally like that because I suck at puzzles. I know a lot of people didn't. They hated how the game felt like it was telling you everything. It was reminding you over and over again, oh, hey, remember this one conversation you had? They remember that you had that conversation. I don't need to be told that. There was a whole lot. If I compare it to writing, the game had a ton, I believe I mentioned this in my first impressions as well, it had a ton of tell versus show, when we wanted a lot more show and less tell. But that's the constructive conversation to have. That's the conversation we should be having. How can we make Dragon Age 5 better? Not how can we make Dragon Age 5 make more money? Honestly, saying a Dragon Age 5 is probably, at least for now, completely out of the question, in all honesty. After all, they fired everybody. They let everybody go. So, not to be a downer, I hate being a fucking downer. Honestly, if they were any more out of touch, they would have said that the reason why that the game didn't meet their sales expectations is because they didn't use the EA launcher. Fuck, I don't want to give them any tip. Like, you know, I don't want them to hear that and be like, no, that's the reason. Like, so I'm just gonna leave you with a quote, with a final quote from David Gaider. My advice to EA, not that they care. You have an IP that a lot of people love deeply. At its height, it sold well enough to make you happy, right? Look at what it did best at the point where it sold the most. Follow Larian's lead and double down on that. The audience is still there and waiting.